Hello everyone and welcome to my channel RPG Retro Reviews. I'm Captain Courageous and I review old school modules and games and suggest how you might adapt them for your current game. In this video, I'm going to take a look at Wizards of the Coast's newly released Tales of the Yawning Portal, a collection of modules from the early days of D&D onward that have been updated with new artwork and adapted to the 5th edition of the rules. And I'm also going to review the digital content on Fantasy Grounds as well. So let's just jump right in. From the time I heard about this book, I knew I wanted it, and after actually reading through the content, I'm pleased to report that Wizards of the Coast has done a great thing here. A greatest hits album for Dungeons & Dragons, a D&D retrospective if you will. For the most part, the modules contained herein remain intact, with the text pulled whole cloth from the originals and updated for the 5th edition of the rules. Now, if all this contained was updated system rules, it might not be worth the investment, but it does so much more than that. There is a ton of updated artwork, monsters, magic items, and more. And this book is a great resource for story ideas and brings back quite a few things from the early days of D&D. So, for old school enthusiasts like myself, this is a time saver on conversions. But let's take a look at the modules included here. We have the Sunless Citadel for levels 1 to 3, the Forge of Fury for levels 3 to 5, the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan for levels 5 to 8, White Plume Mountain for levels 8, Death in Thay for levels 9 to 11, Against the Giants for levels 11 to 14, and Tomb of Horrors for high-level play. So, as you can see, not only do you get a sampling of adventures from all the eras of D&D, but also a progression of adventures from low level to high. Theoretically, you could play each of these modules in order and have a complete campaign. The book begins with an introduction to the Yawning Portal. And for the uninitiated, the Yawning Portal is one of the most infamous taverns in all of Waterdeep, and perhaps all of the Forgotten Realms. Many an adventuring party has gotten its start and its end in this tavern, for its crowning feature is a 40-foot wide well that leads 140 feet down into the infamous Halls of Undermountain. The book gives a rather lengthy introduction to the tavern, as well as introducing some story hooks as to how a DM might integrate these adventures within to their campaign. While I really appreciate the depth of detail here, as well as the story hook ideas, I can't help but think that with that gaping well beckoning them forth, a delve into Halaster's halls will be rather difficult to resist. A few months back, I did a rather lengthy review of both Waterdeep and Undermountain, which included references to tons of resources for running this dungeon and the city itself. If you're going to use the Yawning Portal and have never run a campaign in Waterdeep, you might want to check it out. I'm certain you'll find it useful. After the introduction to the Yawning Portal, the first adventure is the Sunless Citadel. I remember eagerly buying this module when D&D 3.0 was introduced, reading through its pages and becoming enamored with the old school feel of the module. I had every intention of running it, but I never did. It still sits on my shelf to this day in pristine condition, having been read through but never actually ran. I had even purchased a large number of Twig Blight miniatures and painted them up, eager to play out the module, but such a game never materialized. With this new update and the beautifully rendered player maps and Fantasy Grounds, I'm really stoked to get my players around the table to play it out. Back in the day, this was supposed to have been a teaching module for DMs new to 3.0 Dungeons & Dragons. I would say that the update maintains that teaching aspect quite well and would rival Lost Mines of Phandelver as an alternate introduction to 5e D&D. Now the next module presented is the Forge of Fury. It is the follow-up module to the Sunless Citadel, and like that classic module, I purchased it as well and never managed to run it. Thus you have a great 1-2 punch of adventures here to jumpstart your campaign. Well crafted and exciting, The Forge of Fury has chasm battles and a variety of set-piece encounters that do a great job of showing how you can use the environment to amp up the challenge of your battles. The next module presented is the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan. This is a personal favorite of mine. It was one of the early AD&D modules I ran as a newbie DM. A friend and I were at Walden's bookstore, and we were planning on getting together to play D&D that Saturday evening. He looked at the cover of the module and went, "This looks really cool," and purchased it for me to run the next day. I had been a big fan of South and Central American cultures since I learned about the Aztecs and the Incas in the 5th grade. So this really appealed to me. Based heavily on the Aztec culture, this module is full of Gygaxian naturalism. For those not familiar with the term, Gygaxian naturalism is a term coined by old-school blogger James Malazewski, and it basically means that the game mechanics and world simulation blend together to reflect the realities of a game world in which magic commonly exists. In the case of the shrine, the traps presented seem like just the kinds of traps you might find in a temple based on Aztec culture, but rendered in a D&D setting. That being said, the module requires heavy reading by the DM in order to be run correctly, and the first time I ran it, it was a disaster. Of course, I'd only had one day to prepare, so it was to be expected. I put the thing away in disgust and didn't pick it up until I was in the Air Force 6 years later. This time, I thoroughly read through it and became enthralled by what I found and all the things I had missed as my teenage self. This module is akin to Tomb of Horrors in that it is mostly traps rather than monsters and is quite deadly, but not on the same scale. The nice thing about using a virtual tabletop like Fantasy Grounds is the ability to share artwork from a module, and there is a ton of great shots here to convey atmosphere. A lot of fun. This is absolutely a must-run for those who enjoy the classic dungeon crawl. Next up on the roster of classic modules is White Plume Mountain. This is another classic dungeon crawl, and originally part of the S series of modules, S2 to be exact, with S1 being the Tomb of Horrors. Written by Lawrence Schick, White Plume Mountain was his submission to TSR for employment with the company and published in 1979. The module was essentially the best parts from all the dungeons Schick had previously created. To Schick's complete surprise, not only did he get the job, but TSR published it without any changes, which, according to Schick, was both gratifying and embarrassing. The magical weapon Black Razor is a blatant ripoff of Elric's Stormbringer. White Plume Mountain is a classic, and many players over the decades have enjoyed the zany series of encounters. The classic example of the Mad Wizard's Funhouse Dungeon, Tales of the Yawning Portal, does a great job of newly rendering classic artwork. The standout for me is the White Plume Mountain player's map. Originally a handout, this thing just smacks of flavor. The re-rendering of the dungeon and the depictions of some of the classic set pieces deems this worthy as inclusion in this collection of D&D greatest hits. Next up is a module that wasn't even on my radar, but after reading through it, the reason for its inclusion is obvious. Dead in Thay is a classic example of the Mega Dungeon. This module was part of the D&D Next playtest released as part of the Dreams of the Red Wizards campaign. The original concept was that several groups under multiple DMs would attempt it at the same time, with the DMs coordinating their efforts. It sounds interesting, and the map of the place is gorgeous, and much of the artwork is simply awe-inspiring. I'm not exactly sure that it would be ran as is, especially using it from the book. The Mega Dungeon is only given one page, and given the detail, unless you have a magnifying glass, it's sort of a waste. Furthermore, as gorgeous as it is, the players will never see it. From the book, it's eye candy for the DM only. However, this thing screams to be ran from the virtual tabletop, and in that medium, it takes on a life of its own. In this medium, the various sections of the Doom Vault are just gorgeously rendered battle mats. rich with detail and perfect for the slow reveal from a fog of war perspective. 5th edition design philosophy examples abound here, and it holds up rather well. While it is specifically written for the Forgotten Realms campaign, suggestions are given on running it in other published works such as Greyhawk or Eberron. This module has a wealth of ideas, so from that perspective it can be mined if a DM is adapting it as part of his own devious dungeons. But as I said, this is probably best experienced when run in conjunction with a virtual tabletop. Next up is the entire G series of modules, Against the Giants. I've already gone into great detail on this series with my own RPG retrospective review, of which the link is provided here, so please check it out. The G series is the first continuing series of modules ever produced for the D&D game, so the reason for its inclusion and update here is obvious. Updated maps and artwork are excellently done, and this is another series that screams to be ran on the virtual tabletop, so the players can enjoy the map eye candy as well. Lastly, there is the Tomb of Horrors. I've also already gone into great depth on this module, so I'm not going to revisit that here, but I would encourage you to check out my video. As presented in the Yawning Portal, the Tomb of Horrors is still quite deadly, but you won't find any "your character dies, no saving throw" traps here. It has been retooled in places to reflect 5th edition rules, but in my opinion, this only strengthens the adventure, not detract from it. That said, the artwork here is also great. Originally, a picture booklet was included in the module to show players during certain scenes. While not all pictures were re-rendered, there are enough here to show players and evoke the haunting atmosphere of a Cyrirak's deadly tomb. So, should you pick up the Yawning Portal? I think the answer is yes, especially if you are an OSR fan of the game. The book also illustrates an issue with the way things are currently marketed at Wizards of the Coast, because one is faced with the prospect of paying $50 for the virtual tabletop version, or $50 for the print version, or paying $100 for both. Of course, Amazon offers the print version at a hefty discount, and Fantasy Grounds has its own discount method, and I am definitely a fan of both virtual and print. However, as I pointed out in my review of the included adventures, much of it screams for a multimedia approach, given the beauty of the artwork included here. It seems a waste for all of it to be eye candy for the DM only. As for myself, I purchased the book on Amazon and the virtual tabletop version from Fantasy Grounds, getting a hefty discount for both. Thus, the total cost for both was around $70. It would be nice if there was a print and digital option available, but for now, we still are in the 20th century as far as marketing from Wizards of the Coast goes, but who knows what lies in the future. And that brings this review to a close. I hope to manage a few more videos rather quickly. I still have the Masks of Nyarlathotep Hotep review, and I want to review D&D Beyond as well. I am part of the beta test, so I will give my thoughts on it quite soon. Also, I have some fun Hearst Arts projects in the queue, as well as a review on the Castles and Crusades default campaign setting, the Codex of Erd. So please check back for more videos. Please leave your comments below. Give this video a like and subscribe for more content like this. As always, my friends, may your D20 roll true and game on.